Welcome to the exercise configuring for the cloud. Now there's not too much cloud knowledge in here. You can choose the cloud provider of your own, but what we have in here is a workaround around one very understandable problem. Whatever cloud provider you're on, multicast is not too popular with them. Imagine how many virtual networks they would have to have for all of their customers, which you would all need to configure in order to not find any other multicast system that is listening on the same interface, on the same port. So you want to make sure you only find your own systems and not somebody else's. Lucky you, you don't need to have multicast configured. You can use unicast. With unicast, you can either configure every system and make every system known to every other system, which is maximally unpopular and uncomfortable. Now, lucky you, there is yet another protocol, which is the so-called JDBC ping protocol. JDBC, Java Database Connectivity, is using the database and in there a specific table to make all of the different cluster machines known to each other. So as long as you share the database, which you do anyways in a cluster, you will be able to discover what other machine is there. Okay, let's go for the configuration. Number one, we will need to enable JGroups in Portal X properties. And remember, whenever we do that, we'll need to restart Liferay. Now, in here, you will find the cluster link directive, and in a cluster, typically cluster link enabled is true. Now then, we'll need to configure the non-default cluster link channel properties control, which is done through JDBC ping and the transport as well. And we will make cluster link aware of the address, that is the local interface that it uses in order to communicate with each other. And here we'll use the same interface that we will use in order to connect to the MySQL machine. We're assuming that this is right. If you run in a multi-homed machine, in a multi-homed environment where you have multiple network adapters, then you might need to adapt or adopt this to the proper address. This is all based on the JGroups implementation, so you can look up the JGroups documentation for how to do this. Now with this, I'm actually almost done. So Portal X properties is saved and I'm good to go. Why am I good to go? Because we will need, or I will look at the JDBC ping file that we have prepared for you. This is the configuration on how does JDBC ping work. And you will see here that it is using the root user, the password for our database. And yes, this is unsecure. You might remember that from the very first chapters when we configured everything to go to the standard database. With these settings running as root on MySQL, the JGroups component will be able to create their own table in this database. The root user typically has the permissions to create their new tables. If you don't want to grant this, and I would say in a production system you're doing good, not running as root, it is very simple to figure out how to create those tables by yourself. You'll just search for JGroups, JDBC, ping, and database table. And in here you'll find the JDBC ping configuration documentation, which determines or which tells us what kind of properties we can set here. And if I scroll down a bit, it will also give us the table that you can create manually if you want to. And these are the standard statements that are made on this table. And as it says here, keep consistency in the parameter order and choose compatible types appropriate to your database of choice. So it's very easy to figure out what to do. Now let's go back and follow the exercise. We will also need to update the Docker file and enable the JDBC ping file that we have already prepared for you. So let's go into the Docker file And I'm assuming that I will be able to find it just by looking at it. Indeed, this is the line that copies the JDBC ping file into Liferay's class path. So that is what is required in order to run the JDBC ping configuration. Now, once you save this, all of them, you can build your image, or actually your images. Of course, you'll also need to build Liferay Tomcat 2. And then you can restart your machines or your processes, your application servers. I'm doing so one by one. Now, how do you test that everything works? You can look at the database, at the JDBC table that I've just shown you in the documentation. This will actually display which server has been registered in the database. And other than that, everything will work just as before. The only difference is these servers will now no longer use multicast. They will now use unicast and find each other this way. So let's do a quick check on looking at the database. I'm going to use the protocol TCP because I'll need to connect into the Docker container. Password is password. And here I have prepared everything, use lportal, and I can select from jgroups ping, and I see some data. And this is the only difference that you see. If I now connect to my machines, I will see what they are displaying. And that concludes the exercise.